think the numbers really reflect just how critical Aramco is for the kingdom and its economy in transition. But first of all, how sustainable are some of the extraordinary profit results we're seeing from the company?
Well, as you mentioned, this was a good year, but not as good as last year. But last year is, sort of an anomaly. The question is, how does it continue? Aramco has been the engine of the Saudi economy for decades. And so if you look forward, what is the role for an oil company in economic diversification goals domestically, but also in terms of the global economy? Who is going to be buying this product? Where will it be wanted? And what can it be turned into that will continue to be a product that's in high demand? So those are the questions that the Saudi government is asking and that the company is tasked with figuring out. And so I think, a couple of answers are becoming very clear. And one of them is to make this asset more fungible for other state entities. And that's what we see in the transfer of a stake to the PIF, an increasing stake. The PIF can do a lot of things with a 16% stake in Aramco. They can use it as an asset to borrow against. The PIF has been issuing debt on its own. They can use it to of these dividend payments for investments that they want to make locally in the domestic economy. The PIF has a goal of spending about $40 billion a year to generate growth from sectors that are in the non-oil economy. So that's kind of, one key purpose. How do you spend this money? What do you do with it to grow the non-oil economy? And that's what the PIF is doing now. That's their main job. But we're also going to see Aramco taking on responsibilities, some that it has always done in the kingdom. It's always been a company that has built things for other parts of the government outside of the oil sector. It will continue to do so. But interestingly, Aramco is being tasked with building things in the energy sector outside of oil. Aramco has been asked to work with the PIF and Aqua Power, which is the largest kind of solar developer and half owned by the PIF, to help develop a solar power plant in the kingdom. We're also going to see Aramco getting into important businesses like the gas business, which is part of the energy transition. So I think the overall kind of trend line is that Aramco continues to be money to the government, but also getting into a series of different businesses.
Karen, it's fascinating you mentioned this Aramco share transfer to the PIF, which, as you say, is becoming increasingly responsible for accelerating the kingdom's economic diversification plans. What does that 16% stake mean for PIF and Aramco moving forward? On the Aramco side in particular, do you think it reduces the chances of a secondary public listing or an additional equity raise from the company? It's a question I put to management on the earnings call yesterday. They weren't really able to give me an answer.
Well, I did see a quote from Amin Nasser that they would not necessarily need to go to another, 1 or 2% listing of Aramco shares on the Tadawul. But I think we're seeing that there are other decision makers in that question. Notably the chairman of Aramco and the governor of the PIF. And so, the thing about listing additional Aramco shares is that you can list 1% for $20 billion and do that many, many times and still have the bulk of the company owned by the government or state entities. So I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibilities. It's just there are other ways to put that asset to work, like we're seeing in the transfer of a stake, an additional stake to the PIF. I mean, what that does for the PIF, now Aramco is a very important part of the assets under management or, the holdings of the PIF. And so this current new allocation means that about 35% of what the PIF holds is in Aramco shares. So, one of the big goals of the Saudi government is to grow the PIF. And they're getting nearer to that target, getting closer to that $900 billion or even $100 trillion mark, perhaps by the end of this year.
Indeed. And Karen, just before I let you go, on the economic outlook as well, we've just seen non-oil growth popping in the kingdom, but of course, broader GDP declining off the back of lower oil prices and volume sold. When it comes to the economic diversification story moving forward, we know the kingdom is running quite significant budget deficits now. How concerned should international investors be about Saudi Arabia's funding gap? There's so much spending taking place. We have giga projects and mega projects on the horizon that will require additional funding commitments moving forward. There's a lot of spending. Where's all that money going to come from?
Well, the kingdom has not had trouble with investors interested in buying their debt. That has not been a problem. And they still have a relatively low debt to GDP ratio. So if you look across the region, if you're looking into sovereign debt, Saudi Arabia stands out as in a much better position, much higher credit rating than other countries in the region, particularly when we're thinking about like Egypt, for example. So they're in a strong position, but they will have to demonstrate that some of these large mega projects are going to gain momentum, are going to create jobs, and are going to create more domestic economic activity outside of the oil sector. They've seen some progress in tourism. The real challenge will be in sectors like manufacturing and in some of these giga projects, which are away from high population areas.